Assassin's Creed Shadows is hiding one of its best features in a menu you'll probably never open. Buried in the settings is a single toggle that fundamentally changes how assassination works, and it's just the beginning. Today I'm breaking down 11 early tips that will completely transform your experience with this game, starting with the one you need to change before you even hit New Game. Toggle Guaranteed Assassination. Before you do anything else in Assassin's Creed Shadows, before you pick a difficulty, before you watch the opening cutscene, go to Main Menu, then Options, then Gameplay, then Difficulty Tuning, there's a toggle called Guaranteed Assassination. Turn it on. Here's the thing. Ever since Origins overhauled the franchise into a full RPG, Assassin's Creed has had this problem where you could sneak up behind someone, land a perfect hidden blade strike, and the enemy just doesn't die. Because their health bar was too big, because a number on their character sheet was larger than a number on yours. You know, the exact opposite of what an assassin game should feel like. Guaranteed Assassination fixes that entirely. If you land an assassination, the target dies. Every time, regardless of their level, their health pool, or how much armor they're wearing. One clean strike, one dead enemy. The way it worked in every Assassin's Creed before the RPG era. Now, before you think this is some kind of cheat code, it absolutely is not. If an enemy spots Naui before she gets the assassination prompt, that enemy is either alerting every guard in the province or turning around to fight. The stealth requirements don't change at all. You still need to be unseen, you still need to position correctly, and you still need patience. All the toggle removes is the RPG damage check. That invisible math equation that decided whether your perfectly executed stealth kill actually counted. It rewards you for playing like an actual assassin instead of punishing you for not grinding enough side content to inflate your stats. The difficulty of getting into position is the challenge. The kill itself should be the payoff. Guaranteed Assassination just makes sure the game respects your effort, but knowing when to strike is only half the equation. You also need to know what you're looking at, which brings us to a mechanic most players completely underuse. Utilize the Observe mechanic. If you played any Assassin's Creed game before this one, you might assume Observe is just Eagle Vision with a new coat of paint. It's not. Eagle Vision is its own separate ability exclusive to Naui, letting her highlight enemies through walls like she's got thermal goggles stapled to her face. Observe is something different. Hold the button and you get a tactical scan of your surroundings. Enemies get tagged, chests get highlighted, quest objectives reveal themselves, assassination targets glow like they owe you money. Here's the thing though, most players tap it once at the start of a mission, go cool, I see the bad guys, and never touch it again. That's a mistake. Observe isn't a one and done scan. You should be using this constantly, especially as Naui, because it picks up things you will absolutely walk past otherwise. Hidden collectibles, loot tucked behind walls, secondary objectives the game never tells you about. It catches all of it. But here's where it gets interesting. If you're playing with guided mode turned off, which the game actively encourages, Observe suddenly costs you something, specifically scout resources. Every time you use it to locate a specific objective, without waypoints holding your hand, you're burning through your scouting pool. So now your best tactical tool is also a resource drain. You want to use it constantly, but you literally can't afford to. It turns a simple press button, see enemies mechanic into an actual decision. Do you spend the scout charge now to find this one chest, or save it for the assassination target 3 compounds over? And there's one more reason. To keep Observe in your rotation that nobody mentions early on. It identifies Daisho Samurai. These are the specific targets you need to defeat for mastery points, which directly feed into your combat progression. Without Observe, you're just fighting random soldiers and hoping one of them counts. With it, you walk into a camp, immediately spot which enemy is worth mastery points, and prioritize accordingly. That's the difference between efficient progression and wandering around hoping for the best. Think of Observe as 2 tools duct taped together. A free tactical scanner for enemy positions, and a resource-gated precision instrument for tracking objectives. Learning when to use each mode is one of the earliest skill gaps in the game. Now, speaking of Nau's toolkit, there's another mechanic that completely changes how stealth works, and it involves breaking things on purpose. Destroy light sources as Naui. Most stealth games train you to sneak up behind enemies. Crouch, approach from the back, don't get spotted. Assassin's Creed Shadows throws that entire rulebook out the window if you know what you're doing with Naui. Because here's the thing, you can walk directly up to an enemy's face and assassinate them without being detected. You just need to turn the lights off first. Naui can extinguish torches, knock over lanterns, and bump light sources throughout any environment to create pockets of complete darkness. And when I say complete darkness, I mean the kind where the game's detection system essentially treats you like you don't exist. Guards can be staring in your general direction, and if the area is dark enough, Naui is invisible. Front, side, behind, doesn't matter. You're a ghost. This is the mechanic that separates players who think Naui is pretty good at stealth from players who clear entire castles without a single alert. Once you start actively controlling the lighting in an environment, instead of just reacting to it, the stealth system opens up in a way that feels almost broken, in the best possible way. But here's where it gets even better. The game has dynamic shadow mechanics tied to the seasonal cycle and time of day. Shadows shift, light sources change intensity, and your darkness opportunities aren't static from one visit to the next. Winter is particularly interesting because icicles form on rooftops that can alter visibility and change your approach routes entirely. Summer gives you denser foliage to work with. Every season hands you a slightly different stealth puzzle, even in locations you've already cleared. Now combine all of that with gear engravings. Certain equipment in Shadows has engravings that trigger assassination damage bonuses specifically when you're standing in shadow. So you're not just using darkness for stealth, you're using it to hit harder. Extinguish the lights, walk into the darkness zone you just created, and your assassination damage spikes because your gear is literally rewarding you for environmental manipulation. It's a synergy loop between your playstyle and your build that gets more powerful the better you get at controlling light. Get in the habit of destroying every light source you see before engaging anyone. It feels excessive at first, like you're wasting time. You're not. You're turning the entire map into your advantage. But all that fancy gear means nothing if you can't upgrade it, which is exactly why your next hideout decision matters more than you think. Build the forge first. Every RPG has the same annoying cycle. You find a weapon you love, you get attached to it, you name it, you build your entire playstyle around it, and then 3 hours later you replace it with a slightly better stick because the numbers went up. Assassin's Creed. Shadows lets you skip that entirely, but only if you make one specific building decision early. The forge is the single most important structure you can build in your hideout. Not the dojo, not the stables, not anything else. The forge. And you should prioritize it the moment resources allow. Here's how to get it. Complete the Way of the Blacksmith quest, which involves recruiting a blacksmith named Heiji from Sakai. Once he's at your hideout, you can construct the forge for 40 crops, 30 wood, and 10 minerals. That's not cheap for the early game, but every resource you spend pays for itself 10 times over. At level 1, the forge handles basic gear upgrades, fine. But level 2 unlocks standard engravings for weapon customization, letting you tailor equipment to your playstyle instead of hoping you find the right loot. And level 3 opens up legendary engravings and lets you push equipment all the way to level 60. Here's the thing, that level 60 cap combined with the scaling system means any weapon you find at hour 2 can still be your main weapon at hour 60. That Kusarigama from a random chest outside Kyoto, keep it. That Tanto you pulled off a bandit leader in your first real fight, still viable for the endgame. The forge removes the loot treadmill entirely and replaces it with actual gear investment. Instead of constantly checking whether the new drop has better stats than your current loadout, which is basically a second job in most RPGs, you just upgrade what you already have. You build around weapons you actually enjoy using, rather than weapons the game decided have bigger numbers this week. The community consensus is basically unanimous. Forge first, everything else second. Some players argue the study should take priority, and they make a fair point, but the forge directly impacts your combat effectiveness every single time you swing a weapon, and combat is sort of the thing you do most in this game. I don't know what to tell you. Get Heiji. Build the forge, upgrade it as fast as humanly possible. Your future self will thank you when that favorite katana is still shredding enemies 40 hours from now. But speaking of the study, it and the scout system deserve their own conversation, because what they offer is almost as game-changing. Invest in the study and scouts. Most players glance at the study building, shrug, and move on to something flashier. That's a mistake. The study is quietly the second most important structure in your entire hideout, and ignoring it early will cost you hours of grinding later. Here's why. You start the game with 3 scouts. That's it. 3 little guys running around feudal Japan trying to gather resources for your entire operation. The study building has 3 upgrade levels, and each one adds an additional scout to your pool, but that's only half the equation. Every upgrade also reduces quest search zones by 25%. So by the time you fully upgraded, your objective markers go from somewhere in this massive province, good luck to, it's basically right there. Which is, not ideal for the enemies you're hunting, but fantastic for you. Now here's where the real magic happens. Remember the observe mechanic we talked about earlier? Scouts are the fuel for that system. Every time you send a scout out to locate objectives, mark resources, or narrow down search areas, you're pulling from that pool. More scouts means more uses before you run dry. It's not complicated math, but it's math that most players ignore until they're 30 hours in, wondering why everything feels so slow. But the study alone isn't enough. You need to pair it with the stables. At upgrade level 2, the stables reduce your scout deployment cost from 2 resources down to 1. That's not a minor efficiency bump. That's literally doubling how far your scout pool stretches. 3 scouts doing the work of 6, 6 scouts doing the work of 12. The compounding effect is absurd, and if you burn through your scouts mid-season, you're not stuck waiting around. You can manually replenish them at any Kakarega location for 200 mon each. That's pocket change by mid-game standards. Basically the cost of a mediocre sword you'd sell anyway. Think of it as a safety net for when you get overly ambitious with your scouting. The whole system creates a snowball economy. Early study and stables investment means more scouts, which means more resources gathered per season, which means faster upgrades to every other building in your hideout. Players who dump resources into the study first end up with fully upgraded hideouts, while everyone else is still scrounging for wood. It's one of those decisions that feels underwhelming in the moment, but pays dividends for the entire playthrough. Speaking of seasons, they're way more important than you probably think, and not just because the trees look pretty. Master the seasonal cycle. Most people treat the seasons in Assassin's Creed Shadows like a nice visual touch. Cherry blossoms in spring, snow in winter, very pretty, moving on. But the seasonal cycle is actually one of the most powerful systems in the entire game, and it's hiding an infinite resource engine that the game barely explains to you. Here's how it works. The season meter fills by 1 pip every time you complete a story mission or side mission. There are 2 critical notches. The south notch at the halfway point triggers a mid-season refresh. The north notch at the top triggers a full season change. Both of these transitions do something that changes everything about how you approach the game. Every single time a refresher season change occurs, enemies respawn, chests reset, and all regular resources across the map replenish. Your scouts automatically come back too. Every scout you spent gathering intel or collecting materials just refills itself for free, which means if you've been following the earlier advice about building up your study and investing in scouts, this is where that entire strategy pays off. Scouts go out, bring back resources, season ticks over, scouts come back, and the whole cycle starts again. It's basically a conveyor belt of free materials. But here's the part nobody talks about. Because chests and enemies reset at both transitions, you can farm the same castles and hostile locations repeatedly without any mechanical consequence. That fortress you cleared out 2 hours ago, fully restocked. Every chest, every enemy, every resource node. Walk right back in and do it again. The game built an infinite farming loop into its core progression system and then forgot to mention it, which is, not ideal from a tutorial standpoint, but fantastic for you. The seasons themselves also change how stealth works, and this matters more than you'd think. During summer, foliage is thick and lush, giving now significantly more hiding spots outdoors. Tall grass everywhere, dense tree cover, the works. When winter rolls around, that foliage is gone. The trade-off is that bodies of water freeze over, opening entirely new traversal paths. You can walk straight across rivers and lakes that previously blocked your route. Winter also throws icicles onto rooftops. These aren't decoration. They can alert enemies if you're not careful, fundamentally altering stealth dynamics for rooftop approaches. So summer favors ground-level stealth with abundant cover, and winter favors creative routing through frozen terrain but punishes careless elevated movement. The key takeaway is this. Pay attention to where you are on that season meter. If you're 1 mission away from a refresh, that's the perfect time to plan your next castle raid. Clear it out, complete a mission, let the season tick, then go back and clear it again. Free resources, free scout replenishment, zero downside. But if you want something to spend all those resources on, you're going to want to unlock the assassination board that drives the entire main campaign forward. Unlock the Shinbakufu Circle. Once your hideout is running and your scouts are out doing their thing, it's time to actually kill someone. The Shinbakufu Circle is your assassination board, and it's where the real game begins. Here's how it works. The board features 12 Shinbakufu members total. You already took one out during the prologue, which leaves 11 targets spread across Japan, waiting for you to ruin their day. But you can't just pick any name off the board and go hunting. At the start, only 2 targets are available to you, the Wounded and the Golden Teppo. Everyone else stays locked until you start working your way through the circle. Now here's the thing, nobody tells you up front. Those first 2 assassination missions, you have to complete them as Naoe, not Yasuke. Naoe. The game literally will not let you bring the giant armored samurai to these fights, and that's not a bug or an oversight. It's completely intentional. Yasuke doesn't join your roster permanently until you've proven you can handle business with a hidden blade and some patience. The game is straight up telling you, learn stealth first, earn the warrior second. Some players find this frustrating, especially if they bought the game specifically to swing a Kanabo through crowds of enemies. But honestly, it's smart design. Shadows has 2 very different playstyles baked into its DNA, and if you could just default to Yasuke's brute force from minute 1, most people would never bother learning Naoe's toolkit. By gating the heavy combat option behind stealth mastery, the game ensures you actually understand how infiltration works before you get the option to skip it entirely. So which target should you go after first? The Wounded. Not even close. The Golden Teppo is a significantly tougher fight with more complex preparation stages, and tackling that one first is a great way to get yourself killed repeatedly while still learning the basics. The Wounded serves as your proper introduction to how assassination missions actually function in this game, and trust me, you want that tutorial, because these aren't quick kills. Each Shinbakufu target is a multi-stage affair. You'll need to gather intelligence, work with your allies to set up the approach, and complete preparatory objectives before you ever get to the final confrontation. And that final confrontation, it's a full boss fight, every single one. These are substantial mission chains that will eat up real time, so don't walk in expecting to knock out a target in 15 minutes. Think of the Shinbakufu Circle less like a hit list and more like a campaign. Each target is its own storyline with its own build-up, and the satisfaction of finally reaching that boss fight after all the prep work is genuinely one of the best things about Shadows. But taking down targets is only half the equation. If you want Naoe and Yasuke operating at peak performance between assassinations, you need to invest in their personal training, and the game has 2 very specific activities for that. Perform Kujin and Katas. Most players see these on the map and immediately file them under repetitive button press filler. You sit down, you hit some button combinations about 10 times, you get a little visual confirmation, and you move on. Sounds like busy work. And honestly, for about 18 of the 22 Kujin locations, that's a fair assessment. But the first four are something else entirely. Here's the thing. The initial 4 Kujin meditations aren't just mechanical exercises. They generate full-side missions with unique narratives that teach you actual shinobi history through character-specific flashbacks. Naoe's past, her training, the philosophy behind the techniques you're using. It's genuinely well-written stuff that adds layers to a character most players are already invested in. These are narrative goldmines disguised as meditation minigames, and skipping them means missing some of the best character development in the entire game. After those first 4 story-driven ones, the remaining 18 locations can be completed in any order you want. Those are more straightforward. Sit down, do the inputs, collect your reward, move on. Still worth doing, just not for the story. Now this is exclusively a Naoe activity. Yasuke cannot perform Kujin. He gets his own equivalent called Katas, which function similarly but are tailored to his combat-focused identity. The game consistently reinforces this dual protagonist split. Naoe meditates, Yasuke trains. Both feed into the same progression system, just from completely different angles. Speaking of that progression system, here's why you should actually care about doing these. Every single Kujin or kata completion grants you 1 knowledge point toward your knowledge rank. That rank directly gates which skills you can unlock in your mastery trees. So these aren't just flavor activities, They're mechanically essential if you want access to higher tier abilities without grinding every other optional activity on the map. One quality of life detail worth mentioning: if the repeated button inputs aren't your thing, or if accessibility is a concern, you can toggle QuickTime events to autocomplete in the options menu. The game just handles the inputs for you, and you still get the full narrative scenes and the knowledge point reward. Zero penalty for using it. So the strategy is simple. Prioritize the first 4 Kujian locations as soon as they're available. Treat them like story missions, because they basically are. Then knock out the rest at your own pace as you explore. Same goes for Yasuke's katas. Every completion is one more point toward unlocking the skills that actually matter. But those knowledge points deserve their own conversation, because the system they feed into is way more important than most players realize. Collect knowledge points. You know those little orange markers scattered across the map that you've been casually ignoring. Those are knowledge activities. And ignoring them is one of the worst things you can do in this game, because they're quietly gatekeeping the best skills you can unlock. Here's how the system works. Assassin's Creed Shadows ties your combat progression directly to world exploration through something called knowledge ranks. Every time you complete an orange-marked activity on the map, you earn a knowledge point. These activities include shrine prayers, Kujikiri meditations, katas, temple lost page collections, hidden trails, and Kofun chest looting. If you've been doing the Kujikiri and kata activities we just talked about, congratulations, you've already been feeding the system without realizing it. Now here's where the scaling gets deceptive. Each knowledge rank costs 10 points to unlock. That sounds manageable at first, but it adds up fast. You clear a few shrines, grab some lost pages, knock out a couple katas, and you've got your first rank. The game pats you on the back, you unlock a new tier of skills, and you think, oh, this system is generous. It is not, because there are 6 knowledge ranks total, which means you need 60 knowledge points to max out. That basically demands that you complete the majority of knowledge activities across the entire map. The first rank feels like a free sample at the grocery store. The rest of the meal costs your entire afternoon. But here's why this matters beyond just collecting stuff for the sake of collecting stuff. Your mastery skill trees have higher tier abilities that are completely locked behind knowledge rank requirements. You literally cannot purchase them no matter how many skill points you've hoarded. You could be sitting on 50 unspent skill points, and the game will still tell you knowledge rank 4 required, and there's nothing you can do except go explore. Your power ceiling is determined by how much of the world you've actually engaged with, not how many enemies you've killed, which is, not ideal for people who just want to fight things. So if you're looking for the most efficient way to rank up, prioritize lost pages. They're scattered around temples and are by far the easiest knowledge points to collect. No combat encounters, no QTE button sequences, no elaborate puzzles. You just find them and pick them up. Compared to shrine prayers or hidden trails, lost pages are basically free points with minimal time investment. If you're the type of player who wants maximum skill access with minimum detours, lost pages are your best friend. The bottom line is simple. Those orange markers aren't optional decoration. They're the difference between having access to the full skill tree and being permanently stuck at mid-tier abilities, wondering why your build feels incomplete. Every shrine visit, every Kujikiri meditation, every kata performance, every lost page you grab is quietly making your characters stronger in ways that raw combat experience never will. But speaking of raw strength, there are certain obstacles in this game that no amount of skill points or stealth finesse can solve. Sometimes you just need someone who can pick up heavy things and throw them. That's where Yasuke comes in. Use Yasuke for heavy obstacles. Here's something that will save you a genuine headache. If you've been playing mostly as Naoe, loving the stealth, ghosting through castles without a trace, you might not realize that certain areas of the game are literally impossible to complete without Yasuke. Not harder, not less optimal, physically impossible. Yasuke is the only character who can interact with heavy movable objects in the environment. We're talking massive stone blocks, collapsed pillars, debris piles blocking critical pathways. Naoe walks up to these things and the game just shrugs at you. Zero interaction prompt, nothing. You're standing there like an idiot wondering if you missed a grapple point somewhere. You didn't. You brought the wrong character, but it goes beyond just shoving rocks around. Yasuke is also the only one who can pick up and throw explosive pots scattered throughout dungeons and fortified locations. Naoe can't touch them. These aren't just fun combat toys either. Plenty of environmental puzzles require you to carry an explosive pot across a room and detonate it against a cracked wall or weakened barrier to open up entirely new passages. No Yasuke, no explosion, no passage. Simple as that. Here's where it actually matters though. The legendary Kofun dungeons, which contain some of the absolute best gear in the entire game, are specifically designed around Yasuke's capabilities. These aren't optional side content you can ignore. Legendary weapons and armor sets sit behind environmental puzzles that demand his strength. You can walk into a Kofun as Naoe, clear every enemy with perfect stealth, feel great about yourself, and then hit a dead end because there's a boulder only Yasuke can move. The chest with the legendary gear is right there. You can practically see it, and you cannot reach it. The good news is, the game lets you choose your character at the start of each mission, so this isn't a permanent problem, but it is a planning problem. If you're heading into a Kofun dungeon or any area you haven't explored before, default to Yasuke unless you have a specific reason not to. You can always replay with Naoe for the stealth experience later, but discovering that the legendary katana you've been hunting is locked behind a Yasuke-only puzzle after you've already spent 20 minutes clearing the dungeon as Naoe is, not ideal. The smarter approach is to scout areas first. If you spot heavy objects, cracked walls, or explosive pots during your initial exploration, that's the game, telling you Yasuke needs to be here. This isn't the game offering you a fun, optional playstyle difference between two characters. This is the game demanding both. Certain legendary gear is gated behind Yasuke's strength, period. Treat character selection as a tactical decision, not a preference toggle. And honestly, once you start using Yasuke for exploration instead of just combat, you'll notice paths and shortcuts you completely missed before. Blocked climbing routes suddenly open up. Dead ends become throughways. The level design is built around the assumption that you're switching between both characters regularly, and the loot economy rewards you for doing exactly that. But speaking of things, the game wants you to engage with that you might be ignoring. There's an entire hub outside the main game that's handing out free rewards. Visit the Animus Hub. Here's something most people completely skip past in the menus, and honestly, it might be the most forward-thinking feature in the entire game. Assassin's Creed Shadows ships with something called the Animus Hub, and if you've got older AC titles installed on your system, you need to check this immediately. The Animus Hub connects Shadows to Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and Mirage all in one unified interface, with more titles planned down the line. That's not just a fancy menu screen, it's a system that lets you complete what are called projects, basically structured objectives across any of those connected games, and the rewards transferred directly back into Shadows. So that copy of Odyssey you haven't touched since 2019, it can now actively feed your Shadows playthrough with gear, cosmetics, and resources you can't get any other way, which is, not a terrible reason to reinstall a game you abandoned 3 years ago, but the real recurring hook is Animus Anomalies. These are weekly missions that rotate on a 4-mission cycle, giving you fresh objectives every single week without any aggressive monetization attached. You log in, you see what's available, you knock it out. No battle pass, no premium currency pressure, just content on a timer that respects your schedule. The weekly exchange system works alongside this. You've got 4 permanent item slots plus 2 daily refreshing items that swap every 24 hours. That totals roughly 5 new items per week if you're checking in regularly. It's a slow drip of rewards that keeps the game feeling alive without demanding you play 8 hours a day. Now here's the part that lore hunters are going to lose their minds over. The hub contains something called the Vault, an extensive database packed with modern-day narrative elements and encrypted data files. These aren't throwaway collectibles. They provide genuine additional story context to the main Shadows campaign, filling in gaps about the overarching Assassin-Templar conflict that the base game only hints at. Some of the encrypted files require specific actions to unlock, so there's an actual puzzle layer to uncovering the full picture. Great, so I need to play 5 games to understand 1 game. Not exactly. The hub rewards engagement. It doesn't punish the lack of it. Everything in Shadow stands on its own, but if you happen to have those older titles sitting in your library collecting digital dust, you're literally leaving free rewards on the table by not connecting them. The bigger picture here is what this means long term. Ubisoft has built an infrastructure that can keep expanding as more titles get added to the hub. Shadows isn't just a game you finish and shelve. It's designed to be a living entry point into the entire franchise, one that keeps giving you reasons to come back week after week, whether that's for, the weekly anomalies, the rotating exchange items, or slowly decrypting every last file in the vault, there's always something waiting. And honestly, for a feature buried in a submenu that most players will never even open, that's a pretty significant thing to miss. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.